Chapter 1 of the Complete Works of Artemus Ward, Part 4, To California and Return. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Complete Works of Artemus Ward, Part 4, To California and Return. Chapter 1.
On the steamer. New York, October 13th, 1868. The steamer Ariel starts for California at noon. Her decks are crowded with excited passengers, who instantly undertake to look after their trunks and things, and what with our smashing against each other, and the yells of the porters, and the wails over lost baggage, and the crash of boxes, and the roar of boilers, we are for the time being about as unhappy a lot of maniacs as was ever thrown together. I am one of them. I am rushing around with a glaring eye in search of a box. Great jam, in which I find a sweet young lady with golden hair, clinging to me fondly and saying, "Dear George, farewell," discovers her mistake and disappears. I should like to be George some more. Confusion so great that I seek refuge in a stateroom which contains a single lady of 45 summers who says, "Base man, leave me." I leave her. By and by we cool down and become somewhat regulated. Next day. When the gong sounds for breakfast, we are fairly out on the sea, which runs roughly, and the Ariel rocks wildly. Many of the passengers are sick, and the young naval officer establishes a reputation as a wit by carrying to one of the invalids a plate of raw salt pork swimming in cheap molasses. I am not sick, so I roll round the deck in the most cheerful sea dog manner. The next day and the next pass by in a serene manner. The waves are smooth now, and we can all eat and sleep. We might have enjoyed ourselves very well, I fancy, if the Ariel, whose capacity was about 350 passengers, had not on this occasion carried nearly 900, 100 at least of whom were children of an unpleasant age. Captain Semmes captured the Ariel once, and it is to be deeply regretted that that thrifty buccaneer hadn't made mincemeat of her, because she is a miserable tub at best, and hasn't much more right to be afloat than a second-hand coffin has. I do not know her proprietor, Mr. C. Vanderbilt, but I know of several excellent mill privileges in the state of Maine, and not one of them is so thoroughly damned as he was all the way from New York to Aspinwall. I had rather say a pleasant thing than a harsh one, but it is due to the large number of respectable ladies and gentlemen who are on board the steamer Ariel with me that I state here that the accommodations on that steamer were very vile. If I did not so state, my conscience would sting me through life, and I should have harried dreams like Richard III, Esquire. The proprietor apparently thought we were undergoing transportation for life to some lonely island, and the very waiters who brought us meals, that any warden of any penitentiary would blush to offer convicts, seemed to think it was a glaring error our not being in chains. As a specimen of the liberal manner in which this steamer was managed, I will mention that the purser, a very pleasant person by the way, was made to unite the positions of purser, baggage clerk, and doctor; and I one day had a lurking suspicion that he was among the waiters in the dining room, disguised in a white jacket and slipshod pumps. I have spoken my piece about the Ariel, and I hope Mr. Vanderbilt will reform ere it is too late. Dr. Watts says the vilest sinner may return as long as the gas meters work well, or words to that effect. We were so densely crowded on board the Ariel that I cannot conscientiously say we were altogether happy, and sea voyages at best are a little stupid. On the whole, I should prefer a voyage on the Erie Canal, where there isn't any danger, and where you can carry picturesque scenery along with you, so to speak. The Isthmus. On the 9th day we reach Aspinwall in the Republic of Grenada. The president of New Grenada is a Central American named Mosquero. I was told that he derived quite a portion of his income by carrying passengers' valises and things from the steamer to the hotels in Aspinwall. It was an infamous falsehood. Fancy A. Lincoln carrying carpet bags and things. And indeed I should rather trust him with them than Mosquero, because the former gentleman, as I think some one has before observed, is honest. I entrust my bag to a speckled native, who confidentially gives me to understand that he is the only strictly honest person in Aspinwall. The rest, he says, are niggers, which the colored people of the Isthmus regard as about as scathing a thing as they can say of one another. I examined the New Grenadian flag, which waves from the chamber window of the refreshment saloon. It is of simple design. You can make one. Take half of a cotton shirt that has been worn 2 months, and dip it in molasses of the Day and Martin brand. Then let the flies gambol over it for a few days, and you have it. It is an emblem of sweet liberty. At the Howard House the man of sin rubbeth the hair of the horse to the bowels of the cat, and our girls are waving with lily white hoofs in the dazzling waltz. We have a quadrille in which an English person slips up and jams his massive brow against my stomach. He apologizes, and I say, "All right, my lord." I subsequently ascertained that he superintended the shipping of coals for the British steamers, and owned fighting cocks. The ball stops suddenly. Great excitement. One of our passengers, intoxicated and riotous in the street, openly and avowedly desires the entire Republic of New Grenada to come on. In case they do come on, agrees to make it lively for them. He is quieted down at last, and marched off to prison by a squad of Grenadian troops, is musical as he passes the hotel, and smiling sweetly upon the ladies and children on the balcony, expresses a distinct desire to be an angel, and with the angels stand. After which he leaps nimbly into the air and imitates the war cry of the Red Man. The natives amass wealth by carrying valises, etc., then squander it for liquor. My native comes to me as I sit on the veranda of the Howard House smoking a cigar, and solicits the job of taking my things to the cars next morning. He is intoxicated, and has been fighting, to the palpable detriment of his wearing apparel, for he has only a pair of tattered pantaloons and a very small quantity of shirt left. We go to bed. 8 of us are assigned to a small den upstairs, with only 2 lame apologies for beds. Mosquitoes and even rats annoy us fearfully. One bold rat gnaws at the feet of a young Englishman in the party. This was more than the young Englishman could stand, and rising from his bed he asks us if New Grenada wasn't a republic. We said it was. I thought so, he said. Of course, I mean no disrespect to the United States of America in that remark, but I think I prefer a bloated monarchy. He smiled sadly. Then handing his purse and his mother's photograph to another English person, he whispered softly, "If I am eaten up, give them to me mother. Tell her I died like a true Briton, with no faith whatever in the success of a republican form of government." And then he crept back to bed again. We start at 7 the next morning for Panama. My native comes bright and early to transport my carpet sack to the railway station. His clothes have suffered still more during the night, for he comes to me now dressed only in a small rag and 1 boot. At last we are off. "Adios, Americanos," the natives cry, to which I pleasantly reply, "Adieu us, and long may it be before you have a chance to do us again." The cars are comfortable on the Panama Railway, and the country through which we pass is very beautiful. But it will not do to trust it much, because it breeds fevers and other unpleasant disorders at all seasons of the year. Like a girl we most all have known, the isthmus is fair but false. There are mud huts all along the route, and half naked savages gaze patronizingly upon us from their doorways. An elderly lady in spectacles appears to be much scandalized by the scant dress of these people, and wants to know why the selectmen don't put a stop to it. From this, and a remark she incidentally makes about her son, who has invented a washing machine which will wash, wring, and dry a shirt in 10 minutes, I infer that she is from the hills of old New England, like the Hutchinson family. The Central American is lazy. The only exercise he ever takes is to occasionally produce a revolution. When his feet begin to swell and there are premonitory symptoms of gout, he revolutions a spell and then serenely returns to his cigarette and hammock under the palm trees. These Central American republics are queer concerns. I do not, of course, precisely know what the last year's calf's idea of immortal glory may be, but probably they are about as lucid as those of a Central American in regard to a republican form of government. And yet I am told they are a kindly people in the Maine. I never met but one of them, a Costa Rican, on board the Ariel. He lay sick with fever, and I went to him and took his hot hand gently in mine. I shall never forget his look of gratitude. And the next day he borrowed $5 of me, shedding tears as he put it in his pocket. At Panama we lose several of our passengers, and among them 3 Peruvian ladies who go to Lima, the city of volcanic eruptions and veiled black-eyed beauties. The senoritas who leave us at Panama are splendid creatures. They learned me Spanish, and in the soft moonlight we walked on deck and talked of the land of Pizarro. You know old Piz conquered Peru, and although he was not educated at West Point, he had still some military talent. I feel as though I had lost all my relations, including my grandmother and the cooking stove, when these gay young senoritas go away. They do not go to Peru on a Peruvian bark, but on an English steamer. Off to Acapulco. Mexico. We make Acapulco, a Mexican coast town of some importance, in a few days, and all go ashore. The pretty peasant girls peddle necklaces made of shells and oranges in the streets of Acapulco on steamer days. They are quite naive about it. Handing you a necklace, they will say, "Me give you present, senor," and then retire with a low curtsy. Returning, however, in a few moments, they say quite sweetly, "You give me present, senor, of $quarter," which you at once do, unless you have a heart of stone. Acapulco was shelled by the French a year or so before our arrival there, and they effected a landing. But the gay and gallant Mexicans peppered them so persistently and effectually from the mountains near by that they concluded to sell out and leave. Napoleon has no right in Mexico. Mexico may deserve a licking. That is possible enough. Most people do. But nobody has any right to lick Mexico except the United States. We have a right, I flatter myself, to lick the entire continent, including ourselves, any time we want to. The signal gun is fired at 11, and we go off to the steamer in small boats. In our boat is an inebriated United States official, who flings his spectacles overboard and sings a flippant and absurd song about his grandmother's spotted calf with his "Rifle-a tiddly I do," after which he crumbles in an incomprehensible manner into the bottom of the boat and howls dismally. We reach Manzanillo, another coast place, 24 hours after leaving Acapulco. Manzanillo is a little Mexican village, and looks very wretched indeed, sweltering away there on the hot sands. But it is a port of some importance, nevertheless, because a great deal of merchandise finds its way to the interior from there. The white and green flag of Mexico floats from a red steam tug. The Navy of Mexico, by the way, consists of two tugs, a disabled raft, and a basswood life preserver. And the captain of the port comes off to us in his small boat, climbs up the side of the St. Louis, and folds the healthy form of Captain Hudson to his breast. There is no wharf here, and we have to anchor off the town. There was a wharf, but the enterprising Mexican peasantry, who subsist by poling merchandise ashore in dugouts, indignantly tore it up. We take on here some young Mexicans from Colima, who are going to California. They are of the better class, and one young man, who was educated in Madrid, speaks English rather better than I write it. Be careful not to admire any article of an educated Mexican's dress, because if you do he will take it right off and give it to you. And sometimes this might be awkward. I said, "What a beautiful cravat you wear." "It is yours," he exclaimed, quickly unbuckling it, and I could not induce him to take it back again. I am glad I did not tell his sister, who was with him, and with whom I was lucky enough to get acquainted, what a beautiful white hand she had. She might have given it to me on the spot, and that, as she had soft eyes, a queenly form, and a $500,000 or so in her own right, would have made me feel bad. Reports reach us here of high-handed robberies by the banditti all along the road to the City of Mexico. They steal clothes as well as coin. A few days since the mail coach entered the city with all the passengers stark naked. They must have felt mortified. California. We reach San Francisco one Sunday afternoon. I am driven to the Occidental Hotel by a kind-hearted hackman, who states that inasmuch as I have come out there to amuse people, he will only charge me $5. I pay it in gold, of course, because greenbacks are not current on the Pacific coast. Many of the citizens of San Francisco remember the Sabbath day to keep it jolly, and the theaters, the circus, the minstrels, and the music halls are all in full blast tonight. I compromise and go to the Chinese theater, thinking perhaps there can be no great harm in listening to worldly sentiments when expressed in a language I don't understand. The Chinaman at the door takes my ticket with the remark, "Ki hai hai ki shu la," and I tell him on the whole I think he's right. The Chinese play is continued, like a ledger story, from night to night. It commences with the birth of the hero or heroine, which interesting event occurs publicly on the stage, and then follows him or her down to the grave, where it cheerfully ends. Sometimes a Chinese play lasts 6 months. The play I am speaking of had been going on for about 2 months. The heroine had grown up into womanhood, and was on the point, as I inferred, of being married to a young Chinaman in spangled pantaloons and a long black tail. The bride's father came in with his arms full of tea chests, and bestows them with his blessing upon the happy couple. As this play is to run 4 months longer, however, and as my time is limited, I go away at the close of the second act, while the orchestra is performing an overture on gongs and one-stringed fiddles. The doorkeeper again says, "Ki hai hai ki shu la," adding this time, however, "chow wow." I agree with him in regard to the ki and hai ki, but tell him I don't feel altogether certain about the chow wow. To Stockton from San Francisco. Stockton is a beautiful town that has ceased to think of becoming a very large place, and has quietly settled down to a state of serene prosperity. I have my boots repaired there by an artist who informs me that he studied in the penitentiary, and I visit the lunatic asylum, where I encounter a vivacious maniac who invites me to ride in a chariot drawn by 8 lions and a rhinoceros. John Phoenix was once stationed at Stockton, and put his mother aboard the San Francisco boat one morning with the sparkling remark, "Dear mother, be virtuous and you will be happy." Forward to Sacramento, which is the capital of the state, and a very nice old town. They had a flood here some years ago, during which several blocks of buildings sailed out of town, and had never been heard from since. A Chinaman concluded to leave in a washtub, and actually set sail in one of those fragile barks. A drowning man hailed him piteously, thus: "Throw me a rope, oh, throw me a rope." To which the Chinaman excitedly cried, "No have got, how can do?" and went on with the howling current. He was never seen more, but a few weeks after his tail was found by some Sabbath school children in the north part of the State. I go to the mountain towns. The sensational mining days are over, but I find the people jolly and hospitable nevertheless. At Nevada I am called upon, shortly after my arrival, by an athletic, scarlet-faced man who politely says his name is Blaze. "I have a little bill against you, sir," he observes. "A bill? For what?" "For drinks." "Drinks?" "Yes, sir, at my bar. I keep the well known and highly respected coffee house down the street." "But, my dear sir, there is a mistake. I never drank at your bar in my life." "I know it, sir. That isn't the point. The point is this: I pay out money for good liquors, and it is people's own fault if they don't drink them. There are the liquors. Do as you please about drinking them, but you must pay for them. Isn't that fair?" His enormous body, which Puck wouldn't put a girdle around for $40, shook gleefully while I read the eminently original bill. Years ago Mr. Blaze was an agent of the California Stage Company. There was a formidable and well organized opposition to the California Stage Company at that time, and Mr. Blaze rendered them such signal service in his capacity of agent that they were very sorry when he tendered his resignation. "You are some $1,600 behind in your accounts, Mr. Blaze," said the president, "but in view of your faithful and efficient services we shall throw off $800 off that amount." Mr. Blaze seemed touched by this generosity. A tear stood in his eye, and his bosom throbbed audibly. "You will throw off $800? You will?" he at last cried, seizing the president's hand and pressing it passionately to his lips. "I will," returned the president. "Well, sir," said Mr. Blaze, "I'm a gentleman, I am, you bet, and I won't allow no stage company to surpass me in politeness. I'll throw off the other $800, and we'll call it square. No gratitude, sir, no thanks. It is my duty." I get back to San Francisco in a few weeks, and am to start home overland from here. The distance from Sacramento to Atchison, Kansas, by the overland stage route is 2,200 miles. But you can happily accomplish a part of the journey by railroad. The Pacific Railroad is completed 12 miles to Folsom, leaving only 2,188 miles to go by stage. This breaks the monotony. But as it is midwinter, and as there are well substantiated reports of the Piute savages being in one of their sprightly moods when they scalp people, I may say that I do not leave the capital of California in a light-hearted and joyous manner. But leaves have their time to fall, and I have my time to leave, which is now. We ride all day and all night, and ascend and descend some of the most frightful hills I ever saw. We make Johnson's Pass, which is 6,752 feet high, about 2 o'clock in the morning, and go down the great Kingsbury grade with locked wheels. The driver, with whom I sit outside, informs me as we slowly roll down this fearful mountain road, which looks down on either side into an appalling ravine, that he has met accidents in his time, and cost the California Stage Company a great deal of money. "Because," he says, "juries is agin us on principle, and every man who sues us is sure to recover. But it will never be so agin, not with me, you bet." "Well, how is that?" I said. "It was frightfully dark. It was snowing withal, and notwithstanding the brakes were kept hard down, the coach slewed wildly, often fairly touching the brink of the black precipice." "How is that?" I said. "Why, you see," he replied, "that corpses never sue for damages, but maimed people do. And the next time I have an overturn I shall go round and keerfully examine the passengers. Them as is dead I shall let alone, but them as is mutilated I shall finish with the king bolt. Dead folks don't sue. They ain't on it." Thus with anecdote did this driver cheer me up.
End of chapter 1.